सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। Do you all remember Tapona Shatkam? Yes, no, all right. I mean, all 6 verses.
I think you're asking if you remember the text that you gave.
Yeah, right.
I guess I remember that.
Okay, I have 2 more copies. In the book of hymns it is page number 61. So there are about 6 of you. Yeah, there should be more copies out there, but huddle up and read through. The reason we are reading or chanting Tapona Shatkam is it was his birth anniversary, Jayanti, just this Friday. So as a mark of our respect, we offer Tapona Shatkam and remember him fondly. Vyaptam jagadye chidatmabhavat rajva yatha hirhi characharam yat sanyasya sarvam cha sadatmabhave swayam samastam cha babhuvayastu nissanga nirmukti padam prapadya brahmatma bhavena virajito yah Shri Saumyakashisha Maheshwaraya Tasmai Namaswami Tapovanaya Tasmai Namaswami Tapovanaya Akhanda Bhava Shivarupa Tattvaha Chitisvabhava Paramatma Satyaha Satyasya Satya Sudhiyaiva Gamnyaha Parah Pradhanat Parameshwaro Yaha Adyantahino Nirapeksha Diptihi Swata Swarupena Vipullito Yaha Shri Saumyakashisha Maheshwaraya Tasmai Namaswami Tapovanaya Tasmai Namaswami Mantun Nashakyo Manasa Kadachit Vaktum Nakenapi Tatha Navacha बोद्धुं च बुद्ध्यादि तथा न शक्यः बुद्ध्यादिसाक्षी खलु केवलो यः सर्वेन्द्रियातीतपदस्थितोऽपि सर्वेन्द्रियः प्रेरयिता परो यः श्रीसौम्यकाशीशमहेश्वराय तस्मै नमः स्वामी तपोवनाय तस्मै नमः स्वामी तपोवनाय शुद्धातिशुद्धं च सदा प्रबुद्धः विश्वेश्वरो विश्वपरप्रसन्नः व्यापी परब्रह्मणि मोदमानः वेदान्तसारसुधियां शरण्यः भूताधिवासः सर्वाधिपः सर्वजीवात्मको यः श्रीसौम्यकाशीशमहेश्वराय तस्मै नमः स्वामी तपोवनाय तस्मै नमः स्वामी तपोवनाय अशब्दमस्पर्शमरूपवच्च तथा रसं नित्यमगन्धवच्च निरञ्जनं नित्यनिरीहमेकं बुद्धेः परं निर्गुणसद्ध्रुवञ्च गुह्यं गभीरं गगनोपमं यं पश्यन्ति निर्धूतमलायतीन्द्राः श्रीसौम्यकाशीशमहेश्वराय तस्मै नमः स्वामी तपोवनाय तस्मै नमः स्वामी तपोवनाय तेजोमयं दिव्यममेयशक्तिं सनातनं शान्तमनामयं च अद्वैतमाश्चर्यमचिन्त्यरूपं परात्परं नित्यमनन्तमाद्यं ज्ञानप्रकाशेन विशुद्धसत्त्वः यं पश्यति स्वात्मनि चिन्त्यमानं श्रीसौम्यकाशीशमहेश्वराय श्रीसौम्यकाशीशमहेश्वराय तस्मै नमः स्वामी तपोवनाय तस्मै नमः स्वामी तपोवनाय He was born in what year? (1889). It was Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi. What? We do not follow the English calendar, right? So we follow the almanac, which is the Hindu almanac. Accordingly, we have the month divided into Shukla and Krishna Paksha, the darker and the brighter part, with the moons waning and waxing. So he was born in the Shukla Paksha Margashirsha Masa, that's a month, Hindu month, and it was on the Ekadashi, the 11th day, and that happens to be Gita Jayanti also. Gurudev was never directly taught Bhagavad Gita by Tapon Maharaj, and often he used to say that both being born on that day, because Gita Jayanti and Taponji, he says Gita is flowing through me only as a grace of Taponji Maharaj's tapasya. So he used to say that it is Taponji Maharaj who is voicing through him. So that way we offer our salutations and pranams to both Bhagavad Gita and Taponji Maharaj. Now we get to our regularly irregular business, because we have not met in what, 3 weeks? What shloka are we on? So let us chant all verses together till the 10th one. Somebody start the tune, because Tapon Shatkam is ringing in my head and I'll ruin Upadesha Saram now. I'm looking at Karma kim param karma tajjadam kriti mahodadau patana karanam phalama shashvatam gati nirodhakam ishwararpitam nechaya kritam chitta shodhakam mukti sadhakam Kaya vangmana karyamuttamam pujanam japas chintanam kramat jagata ishadhi yukta sevanam ashtamurti bhrad deva pujanam uttamastavad uccamandataha Chittajam japa dhyanamuttamam ajyadharaya srotasa samam sarala chintanam viralatah param bheda bhavanat sohamityasau bhavanabhida pavani mata Bhavashunya sad bhavasustitihi bhavana balad bhaktiruttama hristale mana swastata kriyah bhakti yoga bodhascha nischitam Bhavashunya sad bhavasustitihi. The logic that we are following right now is different kinds of bhakti. So we have seen that bhakti starts with whatever you listen to about more. Even in Bhagavatam, the best means for developing bhakti, because we don't come in with a pre-installed chip that at a certain age that you can push the button and say bhakti on, or install bhakti software 2.0. Nothing of that kind works. How do we develop bhakti? Definitely it is not any such product, otherwise China would have been producing it in bulk. And we would have been getting them in Targets and Walmarts. Because do you know that many of the Hindu idols are now being manufactured in in China? All the plaster of Paris and the fake plastic, cute looking, small idols, which you get in many stores these days. They're all manufactured there. Even the Indian saris. What is the South Indian? Kanchi? You should tell me. I am. Kanjivaram saris. They are also being manufactured in or produced in bulk in China at 1/3 the price. So if bhakti were something like that to be installed, we would have already gotten it in the market. How do you increase bhakti? So one way to increase bhakti is, or the only way, whatever Purana that you read, every devotee has been given this path or method, and the method has always been that the more you listen to the glories of the Lord, And these kids are already laughing. Japa. The more you listen to the glories of that particular Lord, and thanks to Bhagavan Veda Vyasji, he has done an outstanding job of chronologically chronicling all the different deities and their various katha, various stories. So if you are a devotee of Lord Ganesha, so pick the book called Ganesha Purana. It has all stories about Ganesh. If you are a devotee of one or the other form of Devi, so then you pick the book called Devi Bhagavatam. So all the stories of Devi are given in a chronological order. Of course, if you are a devotee of Vishnu, you pick the book called Srimad Bhagavatam. So there you will come across various accounts of all the avatars, not just the top 10 blockbusters. You know, Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Narasimha, that is not in that chronological order. It's a different order. So all these avatars are given, and predominantly the 10th one, the 10th canto of Bhagavatam deals with the entire story of Bhagavan Krishna in all details, about 100 chapters. So that is about Bhagavan Krishna. If you are a devotee of Lord Shiva, so Shiva Purana, Linga Purana, these Puranas talk about all the stories of the Lord. I would say, I would request, ask of you that if you truly want to develop the right sense of bhakti, as much as possible read the originals or the commentaries on the originals. Because most of us at most read Amar Chitrakathas. That's a good introductory book at that age to create that interest, to keep that interest going forward. But having grown to whatever age you are, still hanging on to the memories of Amar Chitrakatha and having various doubts and other questions, it doesn't suit a true seeker. You have to dwell deeper than that. Then somebody said, no, I have not just Amar Chitrakatha, I have seen the entire series of Mahabharata, thanks to B.R. Chopra. This still is not original. Let me ask you this question. Have you seen all the versions of all the, not versions, what do you call it? Series of Hariputtar? Harry Potter. Have you read the books? Which one did you like better? The books? So, why is it that you like the books better? It's because it gives you the opportunity to personalize and visualize that character and the story according to your own direction, which no matter how great the director is, will fall short to your imagination. Therefore, you personalize your own story of that Lord as you go through the original stories. So, as much as you keep hearing to these different glories, there are so many kathakars, there are so many people who have spoken on the Lord, various aspects of the Lord, constantly yearn to learn more and more of that particular form. The more you start listening, there is that bhakti kindled in your own heart. And at that time, when the process of the next step is suggested, you will not smile. Then the repetition of that name of that Lord becomes natural. It need not be enforced by a strict Hitleritarian rule that you should be doing your japa. And then you all smile. He is going to say again japa. It's like a one medicine for any vyadhi, any kind of disease. Swamiji, I am not feeling well, do japa. I am feeling low, do japa. I am confused, do japa. I broke my arm. Whose arm? Okay. He broke his arm. Do japa. It becomes almost like a a fun statement. For everything, it is japa only. But once that bhakti is kindled, then japa has 3 stages. What are the 3 stages of japa? In the very words of Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, Uchcha, Manda and the silent one. So you say it out loud. So if you are a devotee of the Lord, Lord Shiva, so you say Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. And for beginners, I would suggest start with the Likhita Japa. Start with that Likhita Japa wherein all your senses are put into practice, put into that particular channel, the less deviation. And slowly evolve to the loud Japa. From there to a point wherein you whisper to yourself. And then it should become silent. Like when you close your eyes, automatically it should start churning out the name of the Lord. Rather than today who was wearing what, why were they wearing it, were they showing off, were they teasing me, no such. Like what is Trigunatmika in yesterday's banquet, the tamasic aspect, right? Somebody wearing, you don't start brooding, but you really start dwelling deep into the thought. From that level, we moved on to the next shloka. He says, Ajya dharaya srotasa samam sarala chintanam viraratah param. That is in the 7th shloka. If you are searching for what shloka is this? Is it from Upadesha Sara? Yes, it is from Upadesha Sara. That the chintana should become an seamless flow. That when you sit for that japa, no other distractions occur while you are in that japa. That is what builds the intensity of bhakti. If the thought gets broken, for simple example, if you are talking to somebody and instead of being engaged with you in talking to you, and the other person that you are speaking to is fiddling with their phone or reading something else or looking into the computer or doing, what do you feel? That person is not interested in a dialogue, isn't it? Don't you feel that way? Yes, no, all right, something. So it shows that there is a distraction and that person is not interested. Similarly, in our japa, if there is a side thought of different things that are going on, it shows clearly that our focal point on the Lord and bhakti is not yet established. So, ajya dharaya srotasa samam sarala chintanam, that it should be unbroken thought continuously. That you can repeat the thought, you can sit for that 15-20 minutes. It's not the quantity of time, it's the quality of time. In fact, Gurudev says it to such an extent that in 24 hours, if 23.5 hours are lived diligently, and in that half hour wherein you practice to sit in the seat of meditation to do your japa and other processes, and for half a minute your mind gets focused, you have won your first step into the field of spirituality. So it is not that I am doing 45 minutes japa now. In that 45 minutes, how many minutes were unbroken? That continuously it was retained. Sarala chintanam viralataha param. Broken pattern viralataha. Better than that is saralataha, wherein it is unbroken pattern. From here, the next stage in the 8th shloka, we have seen the 8th shloka also last time, whenever we met. Though the homework is not submitted yet. Bheda bhavanat sohamityasau bhavanabhida pavani mata. What is a greater stage? Is wherein Bheda bhavanat saha aham iti asau. In the earlier stage of doing the japa, we have been encouraged to constantly repeat that thought, whatever be the japa, whatever be the mantra, we have been constantly repeating that thought. So there is that entity within who is repeating the thought. There is a thought being repeated. So there is a doer and something is being done. The doer, the japar, the one who is doing japa, is repeating the mantra. There is a separateness. But that separateness should culminate in saha aham iti asau. In the deep silence, awareful silence. For the uninitiated practitioner, when they sit on the seat and they are given mantra to do, they also reach silence. But there is a noise for everybody around because they are snoring away. I used to feel sorry, I used to feel really irritated when somebody would sleep or yawn in my class. But then I graduated out of that feeling. When somebody not just slept but started snoring in my class. So I would request that, it's okay to sleep but don't snore. I finally had pushed from that thing as well. When somebody who slept in my class, snored, comes after the class and says, Swamiji, today's class was the best. It's like stabbing directly into the heart, rubbing it in. That silence is not an awareful silence. The silence that we are talking about, bhavana abhida, wherein the silence is unshattered, that there is not even a ripple. Have you ever been in a lake or a place wherein the lake is so still that it's almost like a mirror? When we were in Kailash the first time, I fell in love with that place. In one shot or one frame, and if you are a photographer, you will understand the language. In one frame, you will have sand dunes, boulders and mountains, hills, greenery in the background, and then the snow-capped mountains, all reflecting into one lake. And you can literally lie onto the floor and look. The entire lake, not even a single ripple. So clear. Such should be the silence within. Unshattered. Such unshattered that there is not even a side commentary. Wah, kya moment hai. There is not even a commentator trying to comment on the silence. The moment there is a commentator, there is a doership born again. That doership and enjoyership are also silenced. Saha aham iti asau. I am this pure, awareful silence. From the repetitive patterns of thought, you come to a point wherein you keep experiencing this silence in little nuggets. Then you evolve. Such stage is called true meditation. Therefore, when people say, teach meditation, meditation is not something that can be taught. All the preparatory steps to reach there can be taught. But you will not truly reach to that meditative state unless you have practiced it. Therefore, start with japa. In order to increase that intensity of devotion, listen to more glories of the Lord. Because this is the silence that you have to reach. Bheda bhavanat sohamityasau bhavana abhida pavani mata. It is considered as sreshtha. Then the next stage, the culmination of bhakti, is explained. See, it is such an untraditional thought, because we have been always growing with the thought or conditioning saying, what is bhakti? Go to the temple, get yourself in the line and get some archana and get some prasad back, and that week's obligation of bhakti is done. Why? I visited temple today. Sometimes when I meet the congregation, my dose of devotion for this week is done. Why? I came to Chinmaya. Or they say, I came to Balavihar. My dose for devotion is done. It's a good start. That is not what is true definition of bhakti. What is the true definition of bhakti? Bhava shunya sat bhava susthiti bhavana balat bhakti uttama. This is the uttama bhakti. Many of them reading this 9th verse will try to ape this bhakti, try to pretend, bring forth this bhakti. I was in the moment. And there are many words that they use. I was in the presence. Whether it is in the temple or whether it is in the garden, being in that moment is called. ठीक है, talking all that stuff is fine. But are you truly there? Or it is just again yada yada yada. Sometimes these Balvihar kids, they give amusing experiences. So once this Balvihar kid came, and it must be that the script that he had been given to say what he has learnt in the class must have been done by his father or teacher with a very sophisticated language. It was written, handwritten. So he really tried. Hari Om, my name is so and so, this is the grade, I am going to tell you what we have learnt in the class. And he tried, really tried there for 30-40 seconds, and it was getting awkward for him. And this is just a 3rd, 4th grader. And he says, yada yada yada, yada yada yada, yada, Hari Om. He literally said this, yada yada yada, yada yada yada, Hari Om. That's what I also felt. So the kid had the presence of mind to turn it into I don't think that he even knew that it was funny. The parents, I could recognize the parents in the congregation. Who exactly were those parents? Because the tension in their face was all over written. And the teachers, they were all red, furious. How could you do this? That in front of everybody? Our mind also does the same thing, constantly, consistently. We learn these few words and try to ape this condition. It cannot be aped. It cannot be, it will be hypocritical. You cannot be a hypocrite in the path of spirituality. Though you find the highest number of hypocrites only here. Bhava shunya sat. No thought ripple. Bhava, thought. No thought ripple occurring. Bhava shunya. It is little different from the shunya that which is talked about by the Buddhist thought. They talk about the ultimate reality to be shunya, that it is void. Here also we are talking about shunya, but shunya of what? Shunya of the thought, that there is no thought ripple occurring. You are awake, you are alert, you are conscious, and yet there is no thought. And once you hit that stage, you lose track of time and space. early mornings, I used to conduct the Upanishad classes here in Saket. After a while, it became very difficult to keep up with the timing. Because I would start my day, do my japa, do my puja and do my japa and then sit for dhyana. And I would lose, sometimes to start at 6:30, I would come at 6:45, 7 o'clock. Once you in that state, there is no track of time or and sometimes I used to put I tried putting a alarm and getting it doesn't, the sounds also don't reach. In that state, the externalities do not become a disturbance any further. You are so deeply absorbed in that silence with it. Bhava shunya, there is no thought ripple occurring. That keeps coming and going. Better than that coming and going system is when bhava susthitihi, that you have firm abidance in that silence within. What is the abidance in that silence? See, shanti means silence. Our shanti is vulnerable. That the moment there is sound, it can be shattered, it can be broken. If I stop speaking, is there silence in this hall? Can you hear that vent, that fan, whatever is? But we get used to it. Sometimes I get into these places, just because she is here, she has inspired me to get the example. Beaumont is one great, at least the older facility that we used to have conduct yajnas. The vents and the blowers are like a Dolby stereo system right next to the speaker. And every 5 minutes or so, it like start, and I have to increase my volume. Do you remember that? ICC. I just forgot that he is also from Beaumont. And suddenly it stops. That is when I realize the exertion that I am putting to beat that noise. So we become accustomed to the noise. So there is silence that we usually see, but that silence is absence of noise. But this silence which we are talking is neither the presence of sound nor the absence of sound. That state which cannot be shattered, that state which cannot be broken by either the presence or the absence of sound. That continuous silence, that continuous peace within, which cannot be shattered even if you go out into the world and interact with the world. As long as we are in the temple or in front of the altar, closed our eyes, we feel that, Swamiji, today's meditation, I felt something really deep silence. What happened to the deep silence? I came out, my wife or my mom or my dog, whatever is there, broken, that silence is broken. But this silence or peace cannot be shattered even when you step out of that seat of meditation. That is called abidance in silence. Abidance in this conscious, awareful existence. Bhava susthitihi. This bhavana, this state of existence is called the highest state of bhakti. Bhaktihi uttama. So where do you start this bhakti? What is the first step? Shravana, to listen to the glories of the Lord. What is the next step? Go ahead, say it. Who said manana? No, japa. Manana is a different process, contemplation. There are themes. Here there is only one thought. In japa again we have 4 steps. Likhita japa, then loud japa, then as a whisper, then seamlessly repeating it within, internally repeating it. Then that whole processing stops when you start reveling in that silence. But it comes and goes. Don't get irritated when you lose it. Many of us get frustrated that this mind is disturbing. Mind's job is to disturb. The moment you find that the mind is irritating, again go back, start the process. And you need extreme amounts of patience. And to deal with whom? Not with your neighbor, not with your neighbor's dog, not with your spouse, not with your brother or sister, with your own stupid mind. It will come to that irritable condition that the moment you sit, it will start its loudness. Still go back to that process and then reach to this silence. It will take years of practice to reach there. It is not that you close your eyes and suddenly tada, you reach there. Nothing happens like a tada. Even in that magic show, have you ever been to a magic show? Tada, and something pops out. Have you ever seen, it's always the worthless things, useless things that pop out of his hat? Ribbons, sparkles, the fake flowers. What else? Bunny. Sometimes pigeons. And why can't he bring out gourmet food and offer it across? Nothing happens with the tada even in a magic show. It's all pre-arranged. So just closing your eyes and saying tada, suddenly. So how fast can it get realized? I'd like to give you the classic answer. Whenever I ask question, the answers that I get is on a highest ranked answers. It depends. So I repeat the same answer back to you. How long to reach to this state? It depends. How sincere are you at every stage? At this stage, somebody has to insist from outside, do your japa. And still we don't take it sincerely. One day, there is that motivation. What are you doing? Writing japa. With why such frustration on your face? I have been asked to do it. You should see in the course, I should have taken those photographs while you are, scribbling that japa. It's like, you're doing some battle there. Why? It is forced. It has to become natural. Bhakti uttama. Any questions on this 9th shloka? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Sometimes we do feel those moments in a very sporadic, I won't say periodic, sporadic experiences One very clear experience that I have is when I was in front of Kailash, the mountain. The first time I saw it, because we had to wait for about 2.5 days for the clouds to clear, and the first darshan, the first glimpse of it, and it just stood there. And people told me, were asking me, why were you crying? I didn't even realize that there were tears flowing out. I'm not a very sentimental, very emotional kind of a person. That, you know, I've been waiting to see you. Nothing of that kind. And I did reach out to Guruji and ask him, I'm not an emotional person, but why did this happen? He says, whenever you hit that silence within, it happens that it just, the tears start flowing. It's not an emotional thing, but it is that connection that you find within. The second time that I found this again in the nature is we drove up from Hoover Dam to what is that Grand Canyon, and by the time we reached, it was late, 10:30 or 11 o'clock that we reached. Found our cabin, settled in. We all planned to wake up early to find the sunrise, and we went to that point where you could see the entire valley with the sunrise, and there was fog, and there was sunrise. I stood there for about 45 minutes. Slowly the fog, it vanished, and there was beautiful sunrise and the entire valley, and it was that moment. Your mind just stopped. So there are that sporadic moments when you do experience, and that is exactly what is being said. But you cannot keep waiting for those sporadic moments to occur in life. It can be trained to reach there. Unfortunately, japa is one of the techniques. So yes. Any other questions? Go ahead. Shoot. So the question that Jayashree is asking, I know you have heard, there are others viewing it, so I have to state that out again. So the question that Jayashree is asking is, I did mention that one of my experiences was that I was so absorbed in the silence that I couldn't even hear my alarm go off. That's what you're indicating. So doesn't that show that your lack of awareness? Because if you are aware, you should be able to hear it. I have disconnected myself from the organs of perception action. So there is no connection anymore there. And since they are not in a functional mode, therefore I am only in that silence, in that awareful silence. Thank goodness that it is not a permanent thing that I get disconnected. The idea is to bring that silence once you are connected with all these instruments, and yet carry that silence forth. That state is called bhaktihi. In the earlier shloka we started susthitihi, firm abidance, that it does not get shattered once you get connected with all your organs of perception action and their interaction with the world outside. It is the next stage to that. Sorry. So, uh, your question again is, if I am being aware of that silence, is there not a doership? That one who is being aware of the silence. True, but the state that is being talked about here, when you try to put them in words, words cannot describe it, and this is the best that you can portray it across. So, though I am using the word of duality here, that you are aware of, there is no you as an entity being aware of something called awareness. It is just being in awareness. Does that make? Mull it over. Any other questions? Online friends, any other questions? Oh, thank you. Why do those sporadic moments of silence occur? Those sporadic moments of silence occur because the mind pauses. It is not processing, it just pauses. And in that pause, what you experience is that sporadic moment of silence. In one of the scriptures, such sporadic moments which can be stated is when somebody gives you a sudden unexpected news, a bad one, and suddenly your mind freezes. It doesn't even recognize the news which has been said, it doesn't even process. As they say, it doesn't even sink in, it just stops in shock. There have been people who have been in trauma, like a sudden accident, and a part of their limb has been hurt really bad, but that person cannot feel the pain or anything. You know, the adrenaline rushing in, and he cannot feel it, totally numb. It almost feels like I am okay, I can go for a jog. It's only when you know, it settles down, then it starts, you start. So what happened in that moment? You're completely hazed out. The processing has stopped. Suddenly somebody walks to you and, you know, slaps you tight. You just like, a freeze, the mind stops. Or somebody throws cold water on your face. And these are the moments that wherein the mind stops. So wherever there is a mind that is led to a considerable amount of time wherein it pauses consciously, like when I say consciously, you may not be aware of the other things happening around, but at that moment you are not sleeping, you are not dreaming, you know that is happening in front of you, but the mind is not processing anything else. It is like, you know, soaking it up. So it is that moment that you find that peace within. So it seems very opposite in nature when you sit for doing japa, that the mind is bringing out more thoughts, they are faster, they are uncontrollable, vague, and lots of dirt filled in it. So this is where Gurudev's example comes handy, very beautiful example he gives. When the Kshira Sagar, then the milky ocean was churned, what was the first thing produced? It was the halahala, the poison that was produced. What was the last thing that was produced? It is the amrita, the undying. Mrita death. Amrita, undying. So what was the first thing produced? Is a poison. So it will be there. It is like you are cleaning the cloth of the texture of mind. All the dirt will flow. So don't panic. Step aside, observe the flow, observe the stench flow by. If you are intensely observing it, many of the vasana patterns are washed just by observing in that process. I mean, eternally we have been carrying these vasana patterns. They can be washed once and for all when you can observe it in that, on that seat of japa. Don't identify, don't feel bad. You will feel bad only when you have given a certain identification to that mind. My mind carrying this many bad thoughts. That's what creates agitation. Disown it. Good. All the dirt is flowing out. Observe it. And lucky we don't have a what do you call that? Transparent sticker or ticker that runs, that every dirty thought that passes by, that everybody else also can read. It just flows by, just observe it. Don't give an identification for it. So after all that cleaning process, then the japa has to become a seamless silence. Then the japa stops. Then you are absorbed. It's a gradual process. So if you are observing lot of dirt flowing by, you are in the right condition. You are in the right direction. No, I know. So it is not a guess. So you are in the right direction. Good. Okay, we'll stop here. Any questions? Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.